I am Coach Jay, and not only a betrayal trauma practitioner, but an intrapersonal relationship coach. And what that is helping people help themselves find a good, strong relationship with who they are, because the relationship you have with yourself sets the tone and standard for all other relationships around you. As always, I start my classes with a corny dad joke. So this morning's is this. A Mexican magician said that he was going to disappear on the count of 3. He said, uno, dos, and then poof, he disappeared without a trace. Ba-dum-bum. All right, if you can take 2 healing breaths with me. So basically it's in through the nose, out through the mouth. You can do this with your eyes open or closed. So we're breathing in all this beautiful healing energy, all this oxygen that's fueling our bodies, and we're breathing out through the mouth. One more time. Smile and release. Get our body ready for some good knowledge. I just want to say, and I've said this before, I read my classes from the notes that I take because I have ADHD, and if I derail from my notes, I will just talk for 45 minutes and give you a bunch of stuff that you're not interested in. So I like to read my notes, therefore you get the most amount of information in the least amount of time. All right, let's see here. Anger is a natural consequence of living through trauma. One of the most dynamic causes of anger in survivors is the missing or lack of setting and maintaining appropriate boundaries. In today's class, we will examine boundaries and how anger explodes onto the scene when our boundaries are not respected. So what are boundaries? Boundaries are what tells others how they can and cannot treat us. Keep in mind, boundaries are like a religion. We don't use our religion to control others. We use our boundaries to control ourselves and to make rules for ourselves. It's like our house. We have rules in our house, whether it's take off your shoes in our house, don't eat in the living room. That doesn't mean we take our rules into other people's houses. Those rules are for our house. We set and enforce our boundaries, and if they get disrespected, then there are consequences. Healthy people will respond to someone crossing their boundaries by providing feedback to the other person that violated their boundaries, saying it isn't okay, as keeping in mind boundaries are worthless if you don't enforce them. Some people will respond well and accept a boundary, but others will challenge your boundaries and constantly attempt to control you and your actions. Boundaries create an appropriate separateness that allows you to know your feelings, make your own decisions, and know who and what to ask for without people pleasing. Healthy boundaries are necessary for good self-care, as without them, you will feel depleted, intruded upon, or taken for granted. It doesn't matter whether it is at work or at home, poor boundaries lead to resentment, hurt, burnout, and anger. Setting boundaries that are meaningful to us is crucial. If we have to have healthy relationships with friends or intimate partners, they are a must. We choose who to interact with. We choose who we feel, and we feel violated if someone who we interact with takes advantage of us or walks over our boundaries. Interacting with others who have poor boundaries is frustrating because you cannot gauge who that person is or what they need. It may be more difficult for people with continuous past trauma or mental health issues to build healthy boundaries because they have suffered so many violations. They lost their drive, they lost touch with their gut and their intuition, and much more. Often, one only feels they have violated a boundary of individuals living with mental health challenges when they have become abusive or do not connect with us anymore. So as I always say, this goes back to what I do as an intrapersonal coach. The more you know you, the more you have your boundaries, the more you enforce your boundaries, the better your relationships are around you, including with yourself. Feeling confused, anxious, or drained are all signs that our boundaries have been crossed and that it's time to act and build them back up again. Only when we have built healthy boundaries and maintained them can we feel respected and safe. The first step in knowing you're right for a healthy relationship to build boundaries, I'm going to give you some things that you have the right to do. You have the right to feel safe in all your relationships. You have the right to your privacy, and you have a right for your boundaries to be respected. You have a right to be heard, to feel validated, to be appreciated, to be valued for you, right, wrong, indifference, all the good, all the bad. You have a right to respect your answer when your answer is no. You have a right to have your needs met. You have a right to be treated respectfully without any abuse. And by the way, these rights pertain to not only us as adults, but also to other children. So these are rights everybody has. So you have to make sure that your rights are not being violated, and also you're not violating somebody else's rights or boundaries. Recognizing personal boundaries. So building personal boundaries is necessary to feel happy and content, and they can range from rigid and strict to almost non-existent. If you have rigid and strict boundaries, you might seem detached from others, even intimate partners, keep others at a distance, avoid close relationships, have very close friends. If your boundaries are too weak and you feel overcome by others' requirements of you, you might also find it difficult to say no, get too involved with other problems, become a people pleaser out of rejection. One of the things that I just want to say is some of our boundaries are flexible. Some of them are, but it has to be up to you to decide if they're flexible. Other boundaries are non-negotiables. So other people can't decide what's a non-negotiable boundary for you or what's a flexible boundary for you. Only you decide that. A person with a healthy boundary can make their expectations of others very clear. They establish what behaviors they will accept from others and what other people can expect from them. With healthy boundaries, you might understand your needs and wants and how to communicate them. You may also value your own opinions and accept when other people tell you no. So, if you want to tell people no and have them respect and accept that, then we need to also respect and accept when other people say no. We don't have to agree with it, like it, love it, emulate it. We just have to respect it. Boundaries can change depending on the situation. You might exhibit strict boundaries at work and be a little bit more looser at home with family and friends. It is vital to not only set boundaries and expect others to respect them, but that you respect boundaries as well, like I just said. This is the adult courtesy way of behaving. So dealing with those who disrespect your boundaries. Everyone experiences during their lifetime people who do not respect our personal boundaries. These folks are toxic and leave us feeling bad about ourselves and our lives. The question becomes, how do you deal with someone who doesn't respect your boundaries? It would help if you also keep in mind how much emotional energy you wish to expend. If the other person drains and needs to make some hard decision, there is no quick way to fix it when someone disrespects your boundaries, but you do have choices to respect to these boundary violations. One choice is that you can disengage from the person who's disrespected you. However, this choice is not always possible or desirable. And when I say disengage, that's on a spectrum. Does that mean you can have a 10-minute conversation with them? Does that mean you can only visit them for an hour? Does that mean 3 times a year you can visit them? I mean, again, these are all your boundaries, your rules. Another choice to limit the time that you're exposed to the person who will disrespect your boundaries, which I just covered. Decide ahead of time or ahead of your visit how long you will remain in their presence. Can you handle 30 minutes? How about an hour? Perhaps 3 hours. Everyone in every situation is different, but remember not to allow someone else to harm you by repeatedly crossing your boundaries. If they do, you give them an ultimatum and explain that you are limiting your time with them and why. Keeping in mind, the people that disrespect our boundaries the most are ourselves. Because what we do is we often either don't have boundaries or we have boundaries and we don't enforce them. And then when we have boundaries and people violate them and we allow them to, then we lay our head on the pillow at night feeling very used and abused because we didn't put ourselves forth enough to prioritize ourselves, to love ourselves enough to say, no, that's a boundary and you crossed it and that's not going to happen in my life. And you can do this very lovingly, very kind, very respectfully. Everyone has had the experience where a friend or a family member disrespects a boundary, but instead of confronting them, we say nothing instead, and we choose to seethe in anger. I kind of just said that, and all that does is anger is like it's eventually it gets pointed towards inward, and we start to have self-loathing and depression and all this other stuff simply because we didn't have the fortitude, the courage, the whatever to say, this is something that means a lot to me, and I'd rather you don't do that again. One consequence of not maintaining healthy boundaries and enforcing them is that resentment grows. I just talked about that. Maybe I should just read my script and not talk. And anger turns inward. There you go. When you turn anger inward and leave it unexpressed appropriately, you set yourself up for depression and other mental health problems. Yeah, that's what I just said. The trick is not to push the anger deep inside yourself. Instead, find a person who will listen and talk to your feelings if you cannot confront the person who hurt you. Talking to someone you can trust will relieve the pressure and allows you to move forward. So a boundary is a barrier that separates us in physical space and clarifies how far someone may go when getting involved in your life. Without healthy boundaries, others cannot know how you feel about what they're doing. You have the right to have boundaries and every right to feel anger when someone disrespects or violates your boundaries. Adults are supposed to respect one another, not spend their time trying to control someone else. Your anger is righteous anger when you make your needs and desires known and someone stomps all over you. But again, keeping in mind, people, we do teach people how to treat us. So if somebody disrespects or violates your boundaries once, you might have a little bit more, leniency, clemency, forgiveness. But as the old saying goes, once shame on you, twice shame on me. You let somebody continuously violate your boundaries, it's no longer their issue. The ownership comes on you. So you need to set boundaries and maintain them. You need to enforce them, especially when dealing with people who are disrespectful of them. If someone disrespects your boundaries, you have the right to act, even if that means never speaking to that person again. And unfortunately, that includes family. I always say blood may be thicker than water, but water doesn't stain. Although that's not necessarily true. If you put water on a wood table, you might leave a stain, but you get my point. Just to kind of close a little bit and for anger, keep in mind, anger is the bodyguard to sadness, fear, and frustration. When someone disrespects our boundaries, we often feel either fear, frustration, or sadness, thus the reason we get angry. The more you enforce your boundaries, the less you get angry in the long run. Because number one, the person who disrespects our boundaries is ourselves. I said that all the time. We disrespect our boundaries the most. And, we teach people how to treat us. I just want to end this class by saying, I was actually speaking to a lady not too long ago from California. And she was probably in her 60s and she's in the dating realm. And she said, Mr. J, I always have a boundary, a rule. Men do not pick me up at my house. I meet them at the restaurant and then we go from there. And then we got talking and she said, this guy at the end of the night, he kind of kissed me. And she was like, and that's fine. He wanted to kiss me. But I also told him, okay, that's good. Thank you. We kissed. We're good. And he got pretty assertive with kissing me. He just continually kept kissing me. And I was thinking to myself, what am I not enforcing my boundaries? Why is he kissing me so much when I told him, okay, we kissed, we're good. And as we were talking more, she eventually admitted to me that she said, well, with this one particular day, and I told him this, I said, listen, I usually don't have men pick me up at my house, but because you're driving from such a far distance, why don't you go ahead and pick me up at my house? And then together we can ride to the restaurant. And I told her, I said, by you negotiating and compromising your boundaries, you told him that he could do the same. So when it came to kissing, he just assumed your boundaries were negotiable. So again, I want to emphasize, not every boundary has to be strict and stern and concrete. There are some wiggle rooms with some, but you got to keep in mind, we do teach people how to treat us.